We aim to produce an interesting show by giving a platform to many different views and perspectives. That's why the opinions expressed and statements made by our guests are theirs and theirs alone. They do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of our presenters, Due North PR, or the podcast itself. You're listening to True North, a regular roundup of business and community news and developments in Northland. Hello, and welcome to True North. As ever, thank you for taking the time to listen. It's Wednesday, the 15th of October, and I'm Peter Heath. On the show ahead,
sometimes there is a little bit of an old boys network, and I'm going to say that with inverted commas because I don't necessarily just mean men. But, quite often people are getting director positions because of who they know.
I speak with Dargaville business owner and highly deliberate governance professional Kathryn de Bruin about her planned, purposeful, and impeccably managed journey to become a director of some very well-respected entities serving the regional and national horticultural sector. What did she learn along the way? And what lessons can she pass on to other Northlanders considering a career in governance? First though, a look at what's happening in business and community news across our region. Back in episode 10, which dropped in early August, we gave you a heads up on the confusion around the topic of an updated national freight demand study. We outlined how the Ministry of Transport chose not to undertake a refresh of the study, and how Transport Minister Chris Bishop wasn't exactly a fan of that decision. We said he was exploring options to commission an update to the study, long overdue, since the government currently relies on pre-COVID freight data to inform transport investment. Well, I'm delighted to say that the Minister has had his way, and that the government has launched an NZTA-backed freight action plan, which will link big airport projects with road and rail. It'll look at national demand and set up a freight advisory council, comprising leaders from across the freight sector, that will provide insights and advice to ministers and relevant government agencies, helping them make informed decisions. In announcing the Freight Action Plan, Transport Minister Chris Bishop said 3 practical initiatives to improve the freight system would support economic growth, productivity, resilience, and safety. It appears that Northland's 3 district councils are making progress in the establishment of a new council-controlled water organisation, which will be responsible for delivering drinking water and wastewater services across the region. A joint plan for how the organisation will deliver the services was approved by the Department of Internal Affairs last week. This deals with how regulatory requirements and quality standards can be met whilst being financially sustainable and supporting forecasted growth. Its implementation will be carried out in 3 phases. Phase 1 involves scoping and preparation, and that runs from now until June 2026. Phase 2 involves establishment and transition, and that runs between June 2026 and July 2027. Then there's the go live and operational phase, which starts in July 2027. Whangarei District Council's General Manager for Waters, Andrew Carvell, has been seconded to lead the early phase of implementation on behalf of the 3 district councils as Water Implementation Program Director until a CEO is appointed in mid-2026. Recruitment for a Northland Waters Establishment Advisory Group is now underway. This group will act as an interim board until the CCO becomes incorporated and a board of directors is appointed in mid-2026. It will comprise 3 to 6 members who will provide independent advice to the elected members' steering group and operational teams. We'll post a link in the show notes to the recruitment ad for the Establishment Advisory Group. Our guest today took a very deliberate decision back in late 2017, early 2018, that she wanted to move into the world of corporate governance. Today, through a combination of clarity of purpose, single-minded determination, resilience, and imagination, She's a sought-after governance professional in addition to running her own highly successful accountancy business in Dargaville. Kathryn de Bruin is a trustee of the Titai Tokoro Water Trust. She served for 6 years on the board of Hort NZ and has served in an advisory capacity at Regional Economic Development Agency Northland Inc. She's a member of the NZ Institute of Directors and the NZ Institute of Primary Industry Management, and a graduate of the Agri Women's Trust Escalator Program of 2017. She and her husband Andre also grow kumara, run cattle, and store lambs on an 80-hectare farm in Kaipara. Kia ora, Kathryn. Thank you for joining us. It's brilliant to have you here on True North.
Thanks, Peter.
Hey, listen, I wanted you as a guest on True North because, in my view, your governance story is a classic case of if you can imagine it, you can make it happen. To start with, I want to take you back to November 2017 when you and I first met. You served as chair of the Northland branch of the NZ Institute of Chartered Accountants and on the Institute's Primary Sector Committee. You had served on the committee of the Northland Agricultural Research Farm and had been a director of a local veterinary club society. You'd been responsible for the working group that had formed the Northland Dairy Development Trust, a joint venture between Fonterra and the Northland Agricultural Research Farm. And at the time, you were still chair of the Dargaville High School Board of Trustees. It must seem a million years ago now.
It certainly does.
I think it's fair to say that none of these were tier one corporate governance roles. Yet you walked into my office absolutely determined that you wanted to break into that world. Not only that, you had a very specific board position in mind. Tell us what was going on with you at the time. What triggered an accountant from Dargaville to hunt down and single-mindedly plan out a directorship with one of the country's largest primary sector organisations?
So what happened was I, as you said, had done the Agri Women's Development Trust program, the Escalator program. And in that, I was really challenged to look at a way that I could expand myself. So I was in my practice in Dargaville, really enjoying working with my clients, but I felt that there was something missing and I needed something that was a little bit more challenging. So I did the Agri Women's Development Trust program, and during that, we had to do some board observations. And so I decided, since I grew kumara and was involved in horticulture, that I would go and observe the Horticulture New Zealand board as part of that. When I was there, I had this absolute revelation that actually I knew just as much as anybody else that was sitting around the table. And I actually would have been able to contribute and been able to add something to the meeting that they were having. After the meeting, when we were standing around talking, a number of the directors on that board asked me if I would be interested in perhaps standing for Horticulture New Zealand the next time the elections came around. And at the time I sort of went, oh yeah, whatever. You don't want this girl from Northland on your board, and sort of laughed it off a bit. And then I went home and started thinking about it and realised that actually that was ticking the boxes that I was needing to sort of give me a bit of a challenge and a bit of a move sideways out of accountancy into something that was a bit of a, as you said, a different tier of governance. Then went about trying to work out how I could get on this board, and came to the conclusion pretty quickly that while I might be very good perhaps at being an accountant, I wasn't very good at writing things, and realised that I needed to have a very good profile and have everything coordinated together between the profile and my speech that I had to give in my website and LinkedIn pages, etc. And that's when I contacted you, because I realised I needed somebody who could do that for me to help me get in. So that's sort of what triggered it, and how I started off going about trying to get onto the board. The thing that you know anyway is that the first time I thought I'd done a lot of work to try and get onto that board, and when they announced the results, I had missed out by 1 vote. So I was totally devastated. I thought I'd done enough, like I guess everybody does, but I hadn't. Someone had done it slightly better. So I had a whole year to think about it and plan what I was going to do, and actually even contemplated whether I was going to stand again. And got to about December, I had a talk to a number of people within the industry, had a talk to the likes of yourself, my husband, other people who I knew that were in similar roles, and decided that yes, I did actually want to go and stand again. So I went through the whole process again, got you to rehash everything that we'd done last time. But this time I decided I was going to perhaps make a bigger effort at connecting with the people who would be voting, and went out and, as you said, single-mindedly went through and contacted everybody that I could find through contacts or through the internet, through Google searches, etc., contact with them, ask them if they'd vote for me, and then hopefully left them to it. And it worked. I ended up getting into the Hort New Zealand board, and actually ended up rolling an incumbent director to do so. So that started my next tier up.
It's a great story of single-minded ambition. You glossed over a fairly important element of that. You said you kind of decided you needed to have a little bit more one-on-one contact with some of the voting members. That must have been quite a fundamental step. Tell us a little bit about how that realization came about and how you went about doing exactly that.
Yes. So one thing that I learnt from the first election was that not a lot of members of Horticulture New Zealand were engaged in the voting process. So it was a very low voter turnout. And so I sort of figured that if I could connect with people and encourage them to vote, then perhaps they weren't voting before, and it would mean that those people were extra voters, and hopefully, through talking to them, that they would understand what it was that I did, where I came from, and that they would be felt that I was a worthy candidate to be voting for.
Oh, well, so they'd have a face to the name, right? They'd have some kind of
a connection,
track record, some relationship. It makes it easier to vote for somebody.
Exactly. And I sat down and had a bit of a think about the sort of people that I would connect with. So I am a kumara grower, as I said before. So it meant that the vegetable sector was an area of horticulture that I knew that I would be affiliated to. But I also sat down and had a look at it a bit wider, and had a look at perhaps people who would connect with me because they lived in an area or a region that had poor infrastructure, was a long way from the city, or perhaps were marginalised because of where they lived. And so I sort of had a bit of a think about who that could be, and what sort of crops they grew in those areas. So, for example, I connected with a lot of the cherry growers who live in Southland. I tried to connect with a lot of people in Gisborne because, again, I felt that, they had similar issues to what we have here in Northland. And so I thought if I was able to connect with them and appeal to them, that they would think that I would be able to take what their issues were through to the national level at the Hort New Zealand board. So I then... because you don't just get a list of everybody who grows fruit and vegetables in New Zealand to be able to connect with them, I had to find these people. So I was aware that there were registers and things that I could access online. For example, the New Zealand GAP register, which is, so to be able to supply food into a supermarket in New Zealand, you have to be New Zealand GAP registered. It's the food assurance program that Horticulture New Zealand administers and uses. So I knew that there was a register of people who were New Zealand GAP registered, so I put some filters on that, sorted out some people from there, found their phone numbers, or if they were someone that I knew of someone who I knew, then I'd contact them that way, and then just got on the phone and started ringing people. So
I love that story. You literally hunted them down,
I
Kathryn.
hunted them down, yeah. And if I couldn't find them that way, then for example, I knew that a lot of the citrus growers sold their product online, so I Google searched, I want to buy some citrus from Gisborne, and got a lot of got a lot of detail from people there. I also so horticulture set up using product groups, so I got in touch with the different product groups for the areas that I wanted to cover. I got in touch with Citrus New Zealand and asked if there was anything that I could do within their boundaries of what they would allow to, make myself known to their members. They said, yeah, that sounds like a grand plan. And I wrote some articles for their monthly newsletter around,
I remember those.
How to be an accountant, etc., etc. Yeah, tried to think a bit outside the square, and as a result, as I said, I ended up with a lot of votes. There were a lot more people voting that particular year, and I don't know whether that was anything to do with me contacting people directly and asking them to vote. My husband told me that it had never happened before. Like he like all the years that we'd been growing, had never been rung by anybody, and he told me that I'd approached it in a completely different way, and so that was something that I felt I did a pretty good job on, if I can say it like that. Pat myself on the back.
Absolutely. Speaking generally, and I guess as a way of informing anybody else who might be in your shoes right now, i.e. looking to become a first-time director, were there any other roadblocks or obstacles in that directorship journey?
Yes, there was. For me, and I mean, this just could be my personality type, and my husband would definitely tell you this, is when I decided that this was an area that I wanted to become part of, I realised that I had a skills shortage. Okay, I'm an accountant. Yes, I can advise people on how to do things in their business, but from a financial perspective. So the first thing that I did, and I actually did this before I even did the AWDT escalator program, is that I did the Institute of Directors week-long live-in course. The other thing that I for me was quite a roadblock is I had 3 young children who, or at that stage they were a little bit older, they were teenagers, but they were very busy people. We live in Dargaville, most of what they did was in Whangarei. So the roadblock for me there was around having the time to do this, because I realised that if I didn't have the time, it was a waste of, there was no point in even starting, because I couldn't dedicate what I would perceive as being the effort into it that it required. So I had to wait, and I realised after doing that course that it wasn't something that I could move straight into. I'd have to give it some time until those activities in my life had finished. And so that was pretty tough, because it meant that I had to sort of sit there and sit on my hands a little bit and sort of wait for the right time for it to happen. And I did that, and going off and doing that escalator program also for me was really important too, because it helped just solidify that I was heading off down the right pathway.
So you're a new director. You've made it onto the board through a combination of imagination and fortitude and persistence and sheer predatory skills.
Yeah.
Do you think incumbent directors are reasonably welcoming and supportive of newbie directors, or is there an element of political patch protection at times? What should a newbie director be aware of?
Okay. I'd actually have to say that I'm pretty lucky in that I've never had or been involved in made to feel that as a newbie director I knew nothing and I had to be careful, if that makes sense. All of the boards that I've been involved in, I've had somebody on them that has mentored me through the director journey of that particular board, because there is a big learning curve and a big settling in period that's required for for any position. And so that whole having a mentor of someone else on the board, I think, is a really good thing. And I was lucky enough with both Hort New Zealand and the Tito Tokoro Water Trust that other directors there, pointed me in the right direction, helped me out. And so I think that would be something that a piece of advice that I'd give to somebody that was coming onto a board is even if they don't have a formal mentor procedure around the board table, that they tried to find somebody on the board that they could use as a bit of a sounding advice and a sounding board. And big shout out to one of my fellow Hort New Zealand directors, Dr. Bruce Campbell, who I'm sure you know from Kerry.
He's a lovely guy, isn't he?
He is. He's great.
He pops up everywhere.
He does pop up everywhere.
I was on Waiheke with him releasing some kiwi the other day.
Yes.
There was Bruce. I was like, what? What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Well, he was great. And because we both lived in Northland, flying home at the same time, we used to have a bit of a debrief in the Koru Lounge on the way home, if he wasn't being interrupted by 50 million other people who knew him. But, and that was really helpful to enabling me to A, feel I belonged, and B, understand some of the things that I didn't particularly understand about the whole horticulture industry.
I was speaking with Tanya McInnes and Cheryl Mai recently about something that they were referring to as heart-led leadership, where the focus is on authenticity, empathy, and connection. Do these values have a place in boardrooms generally, do you think? And if so, are they found in acceptable quantities in Northland?
Well, I think, personally, I think those that type of leadership is what leadership should be. I mean, that's why you're there, because people find you authentic, they find you empathetic, and they find that you have a connection with the organisation or the people around it. So I think they do have a very big place in our boardroom, and I think that you can take, how you look at what those words mean. I don't think it really matters whether you look at them as male or female. They're still words that are extremely helpful for when you're looking at a governance or something through a governance lens. So I think they have a very big place in our boardroom, no matter who you are. I think sometimes there is a little bit of an old boys network, and I'm going to say that with inverted commas because I don't necessarily just mean men, but quite often people are getting director positions because of who they know, rather than it being looking outside the square and going, who's the best person for this job. And in fact,
also, Kathryn, to be fair, maybe there aren't enough people doing a Kathryn de Bruin and going out and hunting and killing their own positions, right?
Yeah, true, perhaps. I mean, I actually was dealing with a client the other day, and we were having a Zoom meeting, and one of the people that they had on their board was a young, I don't think he didn't look like he was out of his early 20s, actually. And it was quite refreshing having him there and talking to him, because he brought a completely different perspective into what they were doing and how they were trying to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm into that. Absolutely. How easy is it to separate your governance role from the executive function? As someone who's been down in the weeds of doing the doing for so long as you will have been as an accountant in your own accountancy business, is it sometimes difficult to step back?
Yes and no. I wanted to step back. If I can say it like that, I wanted to get out of the weeds. That's one reason why I decided I wanted to do this. I was getting a bit sick of doing the doing. So yes and no. I think that, I'll use the Tito Tokoro Water Trust as an example here. So yes, I'm an accountant and I'm on there as a trustee, one of three. So you would expect that I would get quite a lot of the financial questions and things thrown at me. But we have a very capable accountant, and so it's been really good because I've been able to explain things, but I don't have to do the doing, and it's been actually quite refreshing, because I can just step back and say, no, that's not my job. Can you please ask the accountant? And they'll answer that for you. And then if someone says, oh, but what do they mean? Then I can explain it. So I've found that that's been quite useful. I think when I first started on, for example, the Hort New Zealand board, that was something I did have to learn, but then I was not involved in an area of the board at that time. Like I wasn't, for example, the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. I was just a member on it. So I didn't have the, I couldn't, if I can say it like that. So it was actually, for me, quite a refreshing thing to sit there and know that while all this was being discussed or talked about, someone else was actually going to go away and do the doing. And I really appreciated that. I think on a bigger organisation, it perhaps is a lot easier than a smaller one. But it's just about, putting the right hat on. And I think that one of the things that you and I have talked about before is that some of that is about, for example, stepping outside and finding something that allows you to step outside your day job and move into the governance job. And so for me, it's like making sure that I'm dressed appropriately, that I have my Wellington clothes on, my Wellington hat on, if I can say it like that, literally, and that I, am making that conscious effort of, I'm now in a different job, I'm doing a different role, this isn't what I'm doing. And I've talked to my husband a little bit about this. So he is a farmer. He also has quite a lot of director roles, and he says the same thing. He always makes sure that he doesn't wear his farm clothes to a board meeting, because it's enabling him to put what he's been doing on his day-to-day job aside and move into being a director. So I think that for me is something really important.
Yeah, it seems like a really small point to make, but Mike Sim made exactly the same point recently on a recent episode, where he was talking about the need to sort of the need for some directors in smaller to medium-sized sort of family businesses to put their fluoro away and take their safety boots off and go off and rent a room somewhere and act like a director and dress like a director and feel like a director, and that enabled them to make those decisions.
Yeah. Well, Andre and I never do our directors' meetings at home. So that's my husband and I. We always do it away from the kitchen table, because then it actually happens in a civil manner, maybe. But no, it just means it just puts it on a completely different level. And like the other thing, sort of, it's a little bit around this is when I've talked to other women, like I've spoken at a couple of AWDT governance board like leadership discussion panels. And one thing that when I'm talking to other women about, when I'm talking about this, is I quite often describe it as I put my armour on. So what I'm doing is I'm going into a position that can be quite intimidating and scary, especially when you're the only woman. And I have been referred to as the team. I've been asked to make coffee and, think that I'm the secretary. So you've got to try and make people aware that that's not who you are. And so being able to put on something that gives you the confidence to go and act in the way that you need to be acting is really important. And I've sort of said to the ladies, like, for me, it might be that I wear all my fancy jewellery. Someone else might put a whole lot of makeup on or wear their kick-ass shoes and their fancy handbag. And so it's about finding something that gives you the confidence to, when you walk into that room, that you are not just a person sitting in the corner. You're there, you're going to participate, you're going to own it. And I think if you can portray that sort of persona, then when you first, and particularly when you first go into on a board and in a meeting, that you're there and you know what you're doing, and you are, even if you don't, it's that fake it till you make it thing, then that's all got to help.
Yeah, so that comes down to the whole imposter syndrome, right? Is that a thing that any newbie director needs to deal with specifically and to be aware of? They're not the only ones that have ever felt imposter syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And particularly because every single person on that board would have started somewhere along the line. And so you've just got to sit back and remember that they were all new once. And I think that if you can sort of hold those sort of things in your head when you go into a new board situation, it's extremely helpful.
But it must be incredibly difficult because, I mean, seriously, I've often thought about your situation. I mean, you've got Murray McCully as your chair,
Oh,
the
yes.
Takaro Water Trust.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about individuals who are kind of awe-inspiring and terrifying,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
slightly.
Yeah. So
how
when
do you deal with that as a
Yeah.
newbie director?
So when I joined the Tito Tokoro Water Trust, the directors or the trustees are Murray McCully, David Samuels and Ken Rintle and myself. And I sort of went on there. When I started going to those meetings, I was sort of, and I still sometimes do pinch myself about like, why? Why am I there? I mean, I know why I'm there now, but at the start it was like, holy heck. And I think that, like, again, it's coming back to, like, Murray probably doesn't realise it, but the mentoring that he's been able to do just through the way he runs meetings and how he deals with the instance with people and situations has been a huge learning curve for me. And so I think I've been able to sort of flip the intimidation that might come from having very strong personalities that you're working with into something that's helped me in my everyday life, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I'd be terrified. And certainly
Yeah.
the imposter syndrome would be
It's out of the
sitting on
park,
my shoulders.
especially when, like you're sitting there during COVID times and something's not working right. And one of them goes, oh, well, we'll just ring XYZ. And next thing you know, they're on the phone. And then next thing you know, it's all sorted. And I'm sitting there thinking, how did you even know that person? That's someone I read about in the paper. So, yes, it's...
absolutely.
Yeah.
What aspect of the governance journey surprised you the most?
Okay, well, I'd actually have to say, hand on heart, is the impact that you have. And that's one thing that I think even from the little tier one, if you can call them that, positions that you talked about at the beginning that I'd had, right through to the other roles that I hold. And I think that you can't underestimate the impact that you're having on your community, the people around you, the organisation.
I've got to ask, was it worth it? All that hard work right at the beginning, from the moment you knocked on my door all those many years ago. Is governance all it's cracked up to be now that you've had some years on the job? And what aspects of it do you enjoy the most? Is it
Okay,
worth
well, I'm
the
still
effort?
doing it, if I can say it like that. So, yes, I guess it is, I have enjoyed it, and it's certainly been very developmental in lots of ways. Hort New Zealand job has come to an end. I was finding that the travel for that and some of the time commitments for that was meaning that it was taking things away from what I'd call my core business, being my accounting practice. And so that I've had to give up, but it's been with reluctance. I do think that, for me anyway, that whole, as I said, concept of being able to help people, help organisations change things in my community, is something that I get a lot out of when it comes to the whole governance level, because it's in a totally different sphere than where I'm operating in my day job.
So how does one even start the journey, Kathryn? And is there like a point at which you'd say, okay, that's a little signal that's telling me the time is right to start the journey? Um, is it a later career thing? Is it a mid-career thing? And
Yeah.
how do you start? What's the first step?
I actually think it's really important that you start when you're younger, because there's a lot to learn. And you can't discount the learning that you get from being on your local sports club body, or when your children are at school, the school boards, and other things in your community. Those organisations require leadership just as much as anything else. And so to me, that's a really great starting point of sort of working out how you can help. Because there's all sorts of different levels of leadership. And I think that people need to realise that that none's more important than the other, if I can say it like that. I don't believe that I'm more important because I've got a leadership job on Hort New Zealand versus, when I was the board of trustees. It was just as important a job, just in a different area. And so I think that the most important thing is to just have a go. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. You'll work it out pretty quickly.
So in terms of corporate governance and getting onto that corporate governance ladder, where do you
start?
Where do you start? Institute of Directors is an obvious thing, right?
It's a good start. And I think, like, the other thing, I for a long time I used to run quite a lot past Greg Gent. So he was a really good early mentor to me. And I think because he used to encourage me to do things, if I can say it like that. And I think that finding someone that you can talk to, perhaps be encouraged by your family if you don't have somebody like that, or talk to people about it. And then you've just got to wait, unfortunately, till an opportunity comes along, really, and then you've got to take it.
You very obviously followed a route of identifying a chair, a board that you wanted to be on, and then you single-mindedly went out and did that. Is that a better way than casting your net more widely for any old board directorship, do you think? What's the
I think my advice there would be that you really need to identify what it is that you want to be involved in. And for me, the Hort New Zealand board ticked my community boxes, if I can say it like that. One of the things that I did through the Escalator program, which I'm pretty certain that some boards would allow you, whether you were doing it through a formal course of learning or not, is to actually go and observe. So I was lucky enough to also observe the North Power board as part of my program, and that was also really interesting. But it made me realise that actually that's not the sort of board I want to be part of. Like, it wasn't anything personal. It was just that when I went in there, saw what they were doing, it was like, no, okay, that's not really what I want to do. I also went.
You didn't have a personal stake in it in the same way that you have.
And it didn't tick the right boxes. Yeah. I went and had a look at the local council. So I went and observed a few meetings of our local council. Also went, no, that's not really what I want to be involved in as well. So I think that whole just talking to people, finding perhaps a mentor that you can talk to about it, and quite often, because it is who knows, just getting in with the sort of people that or talking to businesses or whatever that may need a board, that you just saying, look, I'm interested, can I come and observe what you're doing, and then if you've got a position, maybe I could be considered. I think that there's nothing wrong with that. You've just got to be a bit forward, put yourself forward a bit, which is a bit hard when you've got, a few doubts about what it is that you might be doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I get that. What would 2025 Kathryn tell 2017 Kathryn if she'd been sitting in my office all those years ago? What words of guidance would you have for anyone wanting to follow your path?
I would go probably, really? But anyway, I'd probably be sitting there and saying, oh, good on you, look what's come from it.
Brilliant. Great way to end. Thank you very, very much for your time. I've got to say, it's wonderful to catch up with you again after all these years. I've been watching your progress quietly from the sidelines and just thinking, oh yeah.
You've got a bit of vested interest in it, haven't you?
That's what happens when you actually set out with purpose. So congratulations, Kathryn, and all the best for whatever follows. And thanks for your time. And take care.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
And that's all for today's program. Many thanks to Kathryn de Bruin. True North will return in 2 weeks' time on the 29th of October, when I'll be speaking with former National Party MP for Northland, Matt King, about the highs and lows of his journey from mainstream public life into the political wilderness. What framed his decisions? What was it like for him inside the national machine as he quite literally broke the party line? How were his friends and family impacted by the turbulent time that followed? And what are his regrets around the way it all panned out? Join us to hear Matt speak on a highly personal level on matters that I certainly haven't heard him speak about before. I'm Peter Heath. Thank you for listening. True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. To support our work and to stay on top of Northland business news and analysis, access the pod on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Please do take that small extra step and subscribe, like, follow, comment, and review, as it helps others find the show. Please also share it with those who may not yet be aware that we exist. As the New Zealand media landscape continues to change, we rely on your support to continue doing what we do. Please let us know what you think about the podcast. Ask questions or make suggestions about topics and people we should feature by emailing us at truenorth@duenorthpr.co.nz. We do read every message.